You look overdressed for that beach, John.
What's that, Ben?
I say you look overdressed for that beach.
It's a little breezy.
Yeah.
Well, you know what they say, life's a beach.
Had to get myself in front of City Hall there so Susan could comment on it. There she goes.
All right, good evening, everybody. It is 6 o'clock straight up on this fine Tuesday evening. I'll check in with city staff and see, are we ready to go on your end?
Yes, Mayor, we're ready to go.
Perfect. All right. Well, I see we have all the council here. So let's get started with this joint meeting of the Cotati City Council and the successor agency to the former Cotati Community Redevelopment Agency for September 27th, 2022. Might have taken one of those two us out of there, I think. Having called the meeting to order, we're next going to do a roll call. And I'll ask the city clerk if we could have a roll call, please.
Councilmember Sparks.
Here.
Councilmember Ford.
Here.
Councilmember Moore.
Here.
Vice Mayor Harvey.
Here.
Mayor Landman.
And here. All right, and next, as we generally do, I'm going to ask the city manager if he'd be so kind as to take a moment and introduce to the public all the members of staff who are here tonight.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council members. So obviously myself, Damien Ovid, city manager. We also have John Walker, our attorney, with us here tonight, as well as most of our department heads. We have Angela Corder, our director of administrative services, Noah Houch, our community development director, Michael Parrish, our chief of police, and then of course Kevin Patterson, our deputy city clerk.
Excellent. Thank you for that. This brings us next to the Pledge of Allegiance. And I'll ask everybody online and at home who wishes to join me. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
to the flag of the
United States of America
and to the republic
for which it stands
one
one
nation,
nation,
Under God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with
with
liberty
liberty
and
and
justice
justice
for all.
for all.
for all.
All right, thank you for that. So this brings us now to item 4, which is the approval of minutes and the notice of waiving of reading of all resolutions and ordinances introduced and were adopted under this agenda. This is an action item. And these would be the minutes for our regular council meeting of September 13th. So I'll begin as always and ask if there's any corrections or additions to the minutes from my colleagues. Let's see if I can see all your hands on the board or on the screen here. And I'm not seeing any. With that, if there's no corrections, I'd like to, let's see. We have no attendees at this point, so I will not open this to public comment at this time. So I will bring it back to see if there's a motion.
Move to approve.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. All right, a motion from the Vice Mayor and a second from Councilmember Ford. Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Sparks.
Yes.
Councilmember Ford.
Yes.
Councilmember Moore.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harvey.
Yes.
Mayor Landman.
And yes. Thank you. So that concludes item 4 and brings us to item 5, which is some announcements. And I'll ask you to bear with me while I read a few announcements for you all. We'll begin with a meeting orientation for new attendees and viewers. In conformance with the Brown Act and the adopted City Council rules, the meeting agenda includes items labeled as action items, where the City Council will consider the item, and citizens are afforded the opportunity to provide comments relevant to the item being discussed. The meeting agenda also includes a citizens business item, which is the designated place on the agenda where citizens have the right to say whatever they wish. The City Council may, or may not choose to respond to comments as the government code allows. However, if the city council declines to respond, it should not be perceived as giving credence to or agreeing with any statements that the city council or its members believe are incorrect, misinformed, or purposefully biased. Next, Measure S supports police services, a variety of recreation programs for all ages, and the maintenance of our streets, parks, and public buildings. You can see details on the web at cotaticity.org. Next, citizens interested in receiving City of Cotati community alerts via text or email are encouraged to sign up with Nixle by downloading the Everbridge app from the iOS or Android App Store, or simply by texting your zip code 94931 to 888-777. And finally, like always, we do love to hear from you, so please feel free to contact the city at 707-792-4600 or by an email to info@cotaticity.org. If you have a non-emergency issue after normal business hours, you can still contact us at 707-792-4611. And of course, if you have an emergency, please do contact 911. Continue to look for updates on the city's website and social media channels available on Facebook, Instagram, Nixle, and of course, Nextdoor. And this brings us to item 6, which is approval of the final agenda. This too is listed as an action item. So I'll ask the city manager if we have any changes to this tonight.
Mayor, I would recommend one change, just to move the public hearing after the regular agenda, because I don't think we have anybody planning to attend for the public hearing, but we do have people here for the meeting.
All right, so we'll be moving the public hearing, bear with me, to after. And I know, look at my colleagues, I'm not seeing any hands go up or any shaking heads or anything like that, so I think that's good. So let's see. I see 2 attendees, so since this is an action item, let's ask if there's any public comment on this.
Thank you, Mayor Landman. Speaking to our attendees tonight, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use your raise hand icon, or if you're dialing in, dial *9. Mayor Landman, that will end public comment.
All right, thank you for that. So we move on to item 7, and this is citizens' business and public comment for consent calendar items. And I once again have something to read, and that's this. Any member of the public wishing to speak to the council on any items listed on the consent calendar or any matters not listed on the agenda that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council may do so at this time. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the council is not allowed to consider issues or take action on any item not listed on the agenda during this period. Pursuant to City Council Policy 2021-01, comments of any member of the public are normally restricted to a total of 3 minutes in length per person for matters not on the agenda, and a total of 3 minutes per person in length for any and all items on the consent calendar. The mayor may extend the time limit for a reasonable time where a disability accommodation has been requested. So that moves us to citizens' business. Let's see. So let us now open this to citizens' business and any comments on the consent calendar.
Thank you, Mayor Landman. If you would like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon, or if you're dialing in, dial *9. Mayor Landman, that will end public comment.
All right, thank you. So this brings us back to consent council. Item 8, we have 3 items, A through C. I'll ask first if any council member wishes to pull any item tonight. And I do see a hand, Council Member Ford.
Yes, I'd like to pull item A.
Item A, all right. And I see another hand from Council Member Sparks. That just went down.
I was also going to request the same.
All right, so we have a case of minds thinking alike tonight. Very good. So we'll pull that item that will be our first item then on our regular agenda very shortly when we get to that next. So that leaves us with 2 items, B through C tonight. And I'll ask if there's no discussion or questions or any wishes to pull anything. Let's see, we've already, if we can have a motion on this, please.
Move to approve the consent calendar minus item A.
Second.
So we have a motion from the Vice Mayor, a second by Councilmember Sparks.
Recording stopped.
And we'll wait a second to see if we can start the recording. And I'll ask that if we could have a roll call vote on that abbreviated consent calendar, please, as soon as possible.
Thank you, Mayor Landman. Minor technical difficulties. Councilmember Sparks?
Yes.
Recording in progress.
Councilmember Ford?
Yes.
Councilmember Moore?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harvey?
Yes.
Mayor Landman?
And yes. All right. Thank you, Council. So that carries. Let's see. So we have completed the consent calendar. This brings us to direction on future agenda items. And I'll ask tonight if any of my colleagues have anything they wish to bring forward. I'm not seeing any hands. I'm seeing some shaking heads, 1 or 2 bemused smiles. So I think we're good to go with that.
There is a hand.
There is a hand. Where are you? There you are. All right.
Sorry,
Councilmember Sparks.
I was a little slow getting my hand up. It wasn't your fault. I had 2 items. I've discussed both of them with the city manager. The first one takes no staff time. I wanted to request that when I know that this is pretty far ahead of time, but when we do the commission and council appointments in 2023 with the new council, I wanted to request that we have those appointment discussions take place on 2 consecutive meetings, maybe the first meeting in January and the second meeting in January, so that we can have an opportunity for everyone to state, basically to get a report from the from staff about what the openings are, what the schedules are, allow folks a chance to register their interest in each committee, and then have some time to think it over and then come back at the following meeting to do the appointments. I thought that it would be nice with some new folks coming on to make the process a little more user-friendly and transparent for new people who might wish to have a little extra time to understand the process and register their interest in commissions. So that was one item. The second item, I'm not sure how much staff time it would take. Spoke to Damien about it. We hadn't quite gotten that far, but I thought it was very timely to bring it now. I would also like to request that we put a plan in place to have a team building session in January or February with the new council, since there's going to be such a turnover. And I thought it'd be really nice to be able to meet in person and have some kind of team building. And since everything moves very slowly, I thought now would be a good time to bring up that request. Great, thank you.
All right, any comment or anything from any of my colleagues? Let's see if I can see all your faces and all your hands at the same time. Sadly, I can't get more than 3 of you at once on this. I do see a hand from the Vice Mayor. Please go ahead.
On the first item on the commissions and committees and stuff, I'm hoping, Damien, as you are meeting with the new folks that are appointed, that you're sharing the whole information packet with them, because it does get into exactly what you're talking about. And that's what the commitment is, what the committee is, when they meet, how often they meet. All of that stuff is always in the staff report, but I'm hoping that Damien would be sharing that information with the candidates as he's meeting with them. Is that correct, Damien, so that they can find out more about those?
Yeah, both incoming council members have had that information given to them.
Okay, and then also I'm a little concerned about waiting until January, because usually we do those in December with the reorganization, so that come January, if there's a change in who's going to be on that they get to start that in January. So if we were going to change when we do that, I would like to see us move that back to December, because that's when we typically do our reorg. And on the second one, I have more of a question on the team building. I've done many team building exercises over the years, and typically it's just the group that's involved. Since we are held by the Brown Act, we are not allowed to be by ourselves, is my understanding. So I guess I'd like a take from the attorney on that. We would have to do something with the public, not with just ourselves, would be my understanding.
That's correct.
Well, since both these items would be potentially coming back as agenda items, they could be discussed at that time. Let me ask, is the intention for these both essentially deal with the upcoming council after reorganization? Is the intention to have this come before the new council or the existing council?
The intention was to try to have it come before the existing council so that we could have plans in place in a timely fashion if we were going to do a team building early in January or February before we have to get into strategic planning and budgeting and all these things, so we can build some working relationships before that point. Then we would need to plan for that now.
I just wanted to clarify that to understand when we'd see this and make sure that staff understood when we'd see this. And also, certainly, I had the same concerns that the vice mayor had, so it would be good to make sure that legal has a good chance to look at this when it comes to us, but I think that'll work fine. All right, I'm not seeing any concerns about going forward with either of those two items from my colleagues. Let me ask. I'm not seeing any hands go up. I'm not seeing any gnashing of teeth or shaking fists. So I think that seems acceptable. So we'll look forward to that in the future, relatively near future, I would imagine. So this would have next brought us to public hearings, but we're going to move this to the end after regular agenda. So this now brings us to our regular agenda. And instead of starting with item A, we're actually going to start with consent item 8A. This was kind of like an outgoing mayor test tonight to see if I could keep this all straight. So we'll see how it goes for the meeting goes. But so far, I think we're hitting everything. So I will, let's see. Let me get to that page. Bear with me just a second, my friends. So I will ask, since we've heard this twice before, I will ask for a very short presentation from staff. And then I will ask Councilmember Ford if he could lead us off just to clarify any concerns he might have had and why he wished to pull this, so we can see what's going on. So with that, I will turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll give just a quick recap on how we got to where we are today. So July 26th of this year, we first opened the public hearing on this item and then had a lengthy discussion, but then continued it to August 23rd. It was continued again on August 23rd without discussion, and then heard again on September 13th, which after a lengthy discussion on September 13th, the authorized use section of AB 481, the AB 481 policy was modified to clarify examples of riotous behavior before it was introduced. And that revised introduced policy is what's attached to the staff report tonight. The two pieces of the military equipment, as I think everyone's well aware, is the command van, operational area van, which is technically a County of Sonoma asset that we operate. And then beanbag or shotguns with beanbag rounds that are specifically only for that purpose. And with that, I'll just end it there. I think everyone's well aware of the subject, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Perfect. Well, first I'll see if anybody has any questions for staff. If not, I'd like to go right to Councilmember Ford and let him speak next.
Thanks, Mayor Lamnan. As we discussed last meeting when this was introduced, some of us have concerns about, I have concerns. The reason I asked to pull this from the consent calendar is only the section called coordination with other jurisdictions, which is about mutual aid, how this policy interacts with mutual aid. And because that that section changed 180 degrees between the original hearing and the continued hearing in September. I felt that did not get adequate consideration of possible alternatives to the language that's in there now. So the current draft before us just says military equipment used by other jurisdictions that are providing mutual aid to this jurisdiction shall comply with their respective military equipment use policies in rendering mutual aid. The chief explained the operational difficulties of the previous wording, which said that the city of Cotati policy would apply to responding agencies, and clearly that's not workable. I understand that. So I've read about 50 other cities' military use policies between last meeting and now, and there are other alternatives for wording, which don't, I think, make big operational differences between what would happen under this proposed policy and these other versions. But some of them give some language that would that give a different flavor to anybody reading, or perhaps to law enforcement undergoing training in the military use policy. So almost all the other policies that I found had in them, in that same section, a sentence that our own personnel, when operating in any jurisdiction, are still subject to our policy. So I think that's an easy add that seems quite consistently applied across all the other cities that I could find, and that's important. But the bigger issue for me is how our department views responding departments when we request mutual aid and how we interact. So I just want to read you some text from the City of Ontario, which is also adopted by at least one other city that I've found, Pinole. So this is just a piece of that. It says, should the police department request mutual aid from another law enforcement agency within the city and military equipment is required during the course of the response, the following shall apply. 1, the department will remain in charge of the overall incident command, meaning in our case, the Cotati Police Department. 2, the incident commander or designee will brief the supervisor from the assisting agency and inform them of the mission, enforcement posture, and any pertinent information related to the incident. 3, the assisting agency will adhere to their respective policies and procedures, particularly those governing use of military equipment. And 4, if the incident commander or their designee is informed of or witnesses the utilization of military equipment by an assisting agency inconsistent with the guidelines set forth in this procedure, the incident commander may elect to cancel the request for mutual aid or reassign the assisting agency to a different support mission. So that language doesn't constrain what our incident commanders have at their have available to them. And I imagine most of that language is actually in our mutual aid policy. I don't think that the rules about who's in charge is clearly our incident commander is still in charge, even when we request mutual aid. And the chief made that clear to us last time. So I think most of that is, there's nothing operationally that constrains what our police do, but it makes it clear that use of military equipment that our department considers egregiously out of line is something that our incident commander could use as a reason to cancel the request. That is not otherwise clear. And so I would rather that we include wording I would propose we just take this wording because it's clearly been vetted. And through the city manager, I did ask that this be, prior to the meeting, be run by the chief and city attorney. So I'm curious to hear if they have any responses, but that's why I pulled it. I would like to see some more language in that mutual response, in the mutual aid section. Thanks.
Mr. Ford, if I could ask you a quick question, just so, because I'm not clear on one thing, so I suspect perhaps some of my colleagues are, the public are. On your second point, I get your first point, and I agree with you. I think most of the things you've read there, I believe we already have somewhere else, but they're essentially what we were talking about. So I personally don't see an issue. But you mentioned item 2, making sure that when we have responding agencies on mutual aid, who might have different military equipment use policies and essentially different equipment than us. You mentioned that if there was a problem with that, the IC could either reassign them or perhaps just cancel that. I was curious, did you mean that use following their regular rules, their community's rules, or are you talking about somebody going outside best practices, something egregiously wrong where there's a duty for the IC to stop that right away? Because if somebody is following, I mean, it says very clearly that whoever responds must follow their city's rules, right? So with that, as long as they're within those rules, I'm not sure if that works, but I just wanted to ask, I wanted to clarify. Or were you looking for what I was thinking about, a worst case example where somebody's used something, for example, we talked about the shotgun is shooting the wooden dowels to disperse a crowd, something like that, that our IC in our city would never allow. And I would think it would be arguable that nobody would. I could certainly see an IC would have the right to cancel that, and I fully support it. But I want to understand which you're proposing.
Yeah, I think the situation I'm trying to address is more like your latter example there, where, but in the case where the responding agency's rules do allow such use, and that is a use, for instance, wooden bullets to disperse crowds is a use that is allowed in some military use policies. And so the language I'm suggesting gives the incident commander the option to say, this response is not going to work in our city. So we need another option. So it doesn't give them a duty to do so. It gives them the option to do so.
If they feel something, and I would agree that given that typically, as mentioned in item 2, the IC is going to brief their supervisor from responding to in terms of what the mission is, what the enforcement posture is, and anything else should be made clear. And if somebody's not following that could be a problem. And so I think, let me ask if that's clear to the rest of the council then. I see Vice Mayor Harvey with your hand up. Please go ahead. And then once the council is kind of clear on this, I will ask the police chief and the city manager to weigh in with their thoughts. Thank you.
Yes, I am comfortable with the additional wording. I just want, again, a little bit of clarification. I want to be sure that the intent is still giving the authority to the incident commander to make that choice at that moment with what is going on, that we're not trying to armchair quarterback and for us to say what they can and can't do. That your intent is to have the incident commander make those determinations at that point in time. Is that your intent?
That's the intent. And
Okay.
So the phrase, can I read it one more time, Marilyn?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
I think that would be helpful. Thank you, Ben.
Yeah.
So I think the only sort of substantive thing here is this number 4. If the incident commander or their designee is informed of or witnesses the utilization of military equipment by an assisting agency inconsistent with the guidelines set forth in this policy, it says procedure. I think it should say policy, but anyway, in this procedure, the incident commander may elect to cancel the request for mutual aid or reassign the assisting agency to a different support mission. But it's may elect, and so it's the incident commander's option at that moment.
Okay. As long as it's still, I don't want to sit on the side and tell, someone what they can and can't. I mean, if all breaks loose, who am I to decide, how much of what we need to do to get our community, and keep our public safe. So with that, that makes me feel more comfortable. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. All right, I do see a hand from Councilmember Sparks, and then if I don't see any more hands, I'd like to see if the city manager and the chief would like to weigh in, if they have any changes to language or if this works for them. And let's go next to Councilmember Sparks.
Thank you. I just had another clarifying question. So when said inconsistent with this procedure, does that mean inconsistent with our own military use policy, such that if they were using any military equipment that's not on our approved list, then that would give the incident commander the discretion. Am I understanding that right?
That is my reading of this. That's what I intend by this policy, to refer to the policy that to our policy.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
All right, Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Lemon. Councilmember Ford, I did have a couple of questions for you on the research that you did on this. When you quoted some language, I guess, from Ontario and Pinole. I don't imagine Ontario and Pinole would be ones that would respond in mutual aid if we needed it. Was there an opportunity to look at mutual aid policies from the agencies that we would typically go to in a situation like that?
Yeah, let's see. I looked at Petaluma, which was largely developed in concert with ours, I think, and actually their language I didn't quite understand. It was a similarly brief one. It was more along the more standard lines, which has the sentence that says that our own personnel are bound by this policy even when they're working somewhere else, and responding agencies are bound by their own policies. So I think that Petaluma's was more along those lines. I couldn't find Santa Rosa's, and I couldn't find the sheriff's.
Or Sonoma State?
Didn't look for that.
Okay. Thank you. That was all my question was on that one.
All right, why don't we, I think it'd be a good time. I would like to see some clarification of the language. Just saying not in our guidelines. I think I appreciated your answer, Councilmember Ford. I'm looking how we could word it, where you were looking for something that was somewhat egregious and outside the norm, potentially problematic, or outside what we would consider best practices for the Cotati Police Department. There was a way to wrap that in a little bit, but ultimately, I think putting it at the IC's discretion is workable. It's just some simple wordsmithing. So why don't we jump right to staff and see what they have for us?
Mayor, I'll lead off, and then the chief can weigh in as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the language that Councilmember Ford brought up regarding mutual aid from another agency is, the chief and I did talk about it, and we're largely totally fine with it. There's on the last item 4, which is the one that we've been spending most of the time talking about, is the one area that we would, or that I think we would suggest some edits to clarify. So one of the just basic, I think, concerns was that part of it says that if the incident commander or designee is informed of or witnesses the utilization of military equipment by an assisting agency inconsistent with the guidelines set forth in this procedure. That was just confusing to us, because mostly because right before that it says that other agencies can use whatever 481 equipment they have. They just have to follow their own 481 policies. But then this would seem to imply that if they use any equipment on there other than beanbag shotguns or our op van, that would be inconsistent by definition. So I had a suggestion for some slightly different language there, just for everyone's consideration. So if the incident, so this is the proposed revised language. If the incident commander or their designee is informed of or witnesses so tactics that are not in the best interest of the city, the incident commander may elect to cancel the request for mutual aid or reassign the assisting agency to a different support mission. Something along those lines.
Okay. All right, Mr. Obid, did you want us to weigh in on that, or would you like to flip this over to Chief just so we could get his input too before we assess this?
I will just say actually one more thing. Sorry, Mayor.
Please.
So the Ontario policy also has another clause in there that's that I think addresses Councilmember Ford's concern about just clarifying that our officers would be using our policy no matter where they're deployed. And that reads, department members are required to adhere to the department's military, that's being the Cotati Police Department, are required to adhere to the department's military equipment procedure and all policies and procedures outlined within the department's policy and procedures manual, regardless of operational jurisdiction. So that's the military equipment as well as of course, our flexible policy. We just have to follow that regardless of where we're deployed. And I did talk about that too, and we're fine with the wording of that.
All right. Chief Parrish, would you like to add anything to that first, please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. So I have no problem with this addendum, and I agree with the city manager's added verbiage of if something's not in the best interest of the city tactically, that the incident commander stops the mutual aid. So I have no issues with this addendum. I would like to share with you a real scenario and the most recent for our city regarding mutual aid and law enforcement outside of the normal everyday backing up a police officer. So about 2 years ago, if you recall, there were about 175 people that planned to march from Sonoma State University to the Cotati Police Department building. And it was about the George Floyd movement and other issues going on at the time. And I anticipated a peaceful protest, but I got to do my job as chief. I got to do my due diligence to keep the city safe and city property safe. I did request mutual aid. I requested mutual aid from the city of Roanoke Park. They sent a sergeant and my best memory is about 6 police officers. So the sergeant was their supervision. I met with the sergeant and I explained to him, I believe we have a peaceful protest on our hands. That's what all the signs are pointing to, because there was a lot of communication that I was privy to, because I was doing my homework on this scheduled protest. And I told the sergeant, this is the plan. The plan is we're not going to go out in front of the building and have a skirmish line. Because frankly, I don't anticipate problems. I said, the plan is we're going to be in the police building in the EOC. And if there's a peaceful protest, we're doing nothing. If things start getting out of hand, then I will begin negotiations with this group and we'll see where it goes from there. And that's what happened. So it was a peaceful protest and Roanoke Park followed my direction as incident commander. If I would have had the sergeant telling me, well, no, chief, we at Roanoke Park, whenever there's any protest in front of a government building, we're going to have a skirmish line and we're going to wear helmets and have batons out. And that's what we're going to do. Then I could have simply just said, thank you, but no, thank you. And I could have just entered the mutual aid request at that time and either not call for another agency for assistance or maybe not, but you just never know what you're going to be up against. You never know. There could be another county that there could be something that's so crazy. I went to the Rodney King riots in the 90s. We could have outside agencies coming in. I can't memorize or know all law enforcement agencies' 481 policy and equipment. But I just wanted to give you a real scenario of what happened most recently. We do have control. We can end mutual aid. And I'm comfortable with the addendum. And I like the city manager's change in verbiage as well.
All right, thank you, Chief. So with that, let me bring it back to the calendar. Mr. Obid, I see your hand. Is that backup or is that a legacy hand?
Sorry, legacy hand.
No problem. I do it
Mr.
all
Mayor, Mr. Mayor, this is the city attorney. I just have
Yes.
a quick comment.
Please.
The significance of these changes are such that the ordinance would have to be reintroduced and brought back in final form at the next meeting if these changes that are proposed were made. So I just want to make sure the council is aware of that.
Yes, thank you. I thought we were going that direction. All right. All right, Mr. Ford, I see your hand up. Why don't you lead us off for this round?
Sure, thanks. My understanding from Mr. Bacher is that this would not have to come to 2 subsequent meetings, just one, and it could presumably be on the consent calendar.
That's correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
Thanks. So as to the city manager's proposed wording for number 4, I'm okay with it. That's fine. I think that the broad strokes of the different wording would still have the desired effect.
All right. Well, this looks like a perfect time then. No, it isn't a perfect time. I see 2 hands, Councilmember Sparks and Vice Mayor Harvey. Then I'd like to go to public comment after that if we could. Please go ahead with questions.
First of all, thank you, Chief Parrish, for sharing that with us. I really commend you for the way that was handled. And as far as the change in the wording that Councilmember Ford proposed, I think it's a big improvement, supportive of it. The change proposed by the city manager, I am not as comfortable with because it does remove the ability. I'm sure the incident commander would still have the ability, but it doesn't lay out in the wording that additional military equipment that's not on our policy would trigger this discretionary decision point. I think it's important for us to have it in the policy that at the point that military equipment specifically is being brought into our community to be used that has not been approved on our policy, then the incident commander needs to take a thought and take a decision about really specifically being mindful of that in that moment, like, okay, this is military equipment that hasn't been approved by the council, so do we want to use that or not? I think the new language kind of muddies that and makes it about more generally tactics that are beneficial to the city or not. And we kind of lose sight of that. No, it's important that we be mindful about bringing in unauthorized military equipment. And I would like to see that called out more specifically.
All right, thank you. And Vice Mayor Harvey, please go ahead.
Yes, Councilmember Ford, thank you for bringing this back. It didn't, I didn't understand last time, why your vote was the way it was. And so I appreciate you doing more research and pulling this and bringing this back. We have worked very, very hard over the years to, work through anything that, we're uncomfortable with, or we think needs, tweaking or changing or whatever. So I really appreciate that you, thought about that and asked for us to have further discussion on that. Because I think that when we work together and we get the words the way we're all comfortable with them, I think that our policy is better. So I just wanted to thank you for that. And as far as what Councilmember Sparks just said, I just wanted to be clear enough that that decision point is left with the incident commander, that just because a particular item is being brought does not mean that a decision is going to be made one way or another. So I'm okay with there being a decision point, but I don't think it should be specifically just for that. I mean, as the chief just pointed out very succinctly, it doesn't have to be an item. As he pointed out, if the sergeant from Roner Park had said, well, we're going to line up and we're going to be in full riot gear, and that isn't what we want, that's a decision point for him as incident commander. And it's not that they brought anything or didn't. Their tactic would maybe not be in the best interest for our community. So I want to leave that open enough that the chief or whoever the incident commander is has that leeway, which is what why we added these things the way we did, to make those decisions. That is what they are operationally in the job for, is to make those operational decisions. And if we are not happy with the way operations are, at any level of any department, then that is up to us to make changes to those departments. So thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Since we've kind of segued into a few comments instead of just questions, I'm going to check in with Councilmember Moore. You haven't spoke yet. Is there anything you'd like to add before we go to public comment? Or are you good?
Not at this point. Thank you, Mayor Lemon. No, I'll wait for public comment.
All right. I'll just briefly say, yeah, I'm comfortable with where this is going. I think I like the city manager's language better. I'm not sure why we're focusing so much on unauthorized military equipment. It has a terribly frightening sound to it, but all that means is just something we don't have. If you look at the two pieces of equipment, one of them is an ancient Dodge wagon, which I understand is referred to as the potato chip van most of the time. It's pretty innocuous. I like the idea of just best practices, or I forget how the city manager worded exactly, because I think that's bigger. That encompasses things that also include our own practices. That encompasses anything that incident commander thinks is, wait a minute, this is out of hands, potentially dangerous to the public. It's an unnecessary escalation, perhaps, of force, which has to be carefully controlled. So I think this gives us a bigger reach than simply just making a bogeyman out of military equipment, and the fact that we haven't reviewed it all and blessed it to say that it fits what we believe is appropriate. So at any rate, I'm supportive of that. Let's now see if we have any public comment before we bring this back for any further discussion, see if we will reintroduce this ordinance.
Thank you, Mayor Landman. Speaking to our attendees tonight, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use your raise hand icon, or if you're dialing in, dial *9. Mayor Landman, that will end public comment.
Thank you very much. So we'll bring it back.
Sorry,
to
Mayor
council.
Landman, there's a hand that just went up. Do you mind?
Not at all.
Thank you. Carol W., please go ahead. Carol W., you have the floor. Carol W., it looks like you are unmuted. Or now you're muted.
We seem to be having some typical difficulties, Carol. You're unmuted, but we're not hearing you. I'll ask staff, do we have anybody else that was queuing up to speak? I wonder if we could go to other public comment first, and then perhaps come back to this attendee and see if they're able to speak then.
That is the only hand at this time.
All right, well, let's just give this another 10 seconds. Carol, I'll ask you to see if you can figure out what's going on there. All right, I'm sorry, we seem to be having issues tonight. That's not unusual in this digital world. So we will then bring this back from public comment back to the council for any further discussion. And I imagine I'll ask Mr. Ford, since you pulled this, if you would like to form it in the terms of moving the reintroduction of this with the appropriate changes that we've discussed. I'll leave that to you. But right now, I see a hand from Councilmember Sparks first. So
Thank
please
you.
go ahead, Councilmember Sparks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two of my colleagues asked why there was such a focus on military equipment piece of that. As the reason is because we're discussing the military equipment policy tonight. So that's why I'm focused on that part of it. There was another comment about these are just pieces of equipment we don't happen to have. That's true. If we did have that equipment, then there would have been an opportunity for us to discuss which types of equipment we think are appropriate in Cotati. And given that we have not discussed whether or not, and we have not deliberated as a council and gotten public input about whether or not a wide variety of different types of military equipment that are in use would be appropriate in Cotati. We haven't discussed that because we don't have those types of equipment. So I'd like there to be a safeguard that says if a piece of equipment is going to be brought in that we haven't had the opportunity to discuss and deliberate about, then that's at least going to trigger a decision point that the incident commander is going to need to think about that. And I'm sure that Chief Parrish does that, but I'd like it to be codified in policy that if it's something we haven't had a chance to deliberate about and it's being brought in, then there should be a conscious decision made to bring that equipment in. It shouldn't just happen without any oversight or thought put into it. Thank you.
Understood. That is somewhat different than what Mr. Ford was suggesting earlier. So we'll have to look at that. Councilman Vice Mayor Harvey, please go ahead. Now I'll go to you, Councilmember Ford. I see your hand.
Well, not to get into a back and forth, but that implies that what you're asking for is almost a report. Here's what came, here's what you did, here's what you decided. And sometimes this stuff is fluid. I'm not clear what it is specifically that you would like from the chief or whoever it is, the incident commander, to be able to ensure that you are reported to that a decision was made. What form do you want to see that decision in? Because sometimes decisions are made, in split second timing. So if you could elaborate on that, I might feel more comfortable. But it sounds almost as if you want a, written deliberation and a community deliberation if something comes in. So if you could elaborate, that would help.
Well, I think you said you didn't want it back and forth, but I don't see how we can't do it. So, Councilmember Sparks, I'm going to let you have one more bite at the apple here. Please,
sure.
please, yeah.
So the original language that Councilmember Ford proposed, it said that if something comes in that's inconsistent with our policy, then it gives the incident commander the authority to cancel the mutual aid. And I thought that being retained would make me feel more comfortable with this, because then it's explicitly saying if there's military equipment that comes in, then that triggers that, it's explicitly said that then the incident commander can cancel the mutual aid. I'm not looking for a written report, of course, in the moment. I'm not sure. I'm sorry that it sounded that way. I don't want a written report to be drawn up during the incident. But I do think that it would be appropriate to get a report after the fact of what military equipment was used in our jurisdiction. So I can't recall. There was a lot in what Councilmember Ford originally read. I can't recall if that was part of it or not. But I would be supportive of having something that said that if military equipment that's not consistent with our policy is used in a mutual aid incident, then it should be reported during the end of the year report, the annual report.
Councilmember Ford, you've been waiting a bit to speak. Please go ahead.
I've been trying to formulate a version of that item 4 that the city manager reframed as if the incident commander or their designee is informed of or witnesses tactics that are, I forget it, tactics that are not in the city's best interest or something like that. And then the incident commander can, cancel the request or whatever. And I appreciate Councilmember Sparks' desire that this item explicitly say, or a use of military equipment that is inconsistent with our policy. And that would explicitly be an option for the incident commander then to cancel the mutual aid. Nobody's proposing anything that would take the authority away from the incident commander to make a call. And as I understand our mutual aid policy, as Chief Parrish explained it, the incident commander already has that option. So we're not proposing any new options. It's just trying to say right in the military aid policy that if a jurisdiction brings a particular use of military equipment into our city that the incident commander decides is not in the best interest of the city, then that's an option. Then the incident commander has the option to cancel. And I don't see the problem with that. It's just calling out, use of military equipment that's not covered by our policy gives the incident commander the option to go a different route. And so I said I was originally okay with the city manager's proposed wording because the location of this item in the military equipment policy signals to me that use of military equipment that's not in the city's best interest would give the incident commander the authority to cancel the request. But I understand Councilmember Sparks' desire to have use of military equipment listed right in that just so that as incident commanders are trained, they get to know our policies, they understand if another agency that has radically different policies, both equipment and policies from ours comes to town, then I still have the option to say, no, thank you, but that's not the direction we go here, just like the chief described as the option he has. So I would like to add the phrase, or military equipment used inconsistent with Cotati's policy to number 4 from the city manager's version. So it would say something like, if the incident commander or their designee is informed of our witnesses tactics or military equipment used inconsistent with the city's policy, then the incident commander may elect to cancel the request for mutual aid or reassign the assisting agency, et cetera, et cetera.
All right, Mr. Ford, I have one, I'm kind of good with that. I was actually made a note and said, very close to what you did. I wrote tactics or use of equipment, not in the best interests, I think was the terminology the city manager had, I forget. Adding, I felt that use, not just equipment, but the use of it, because it's not the equipment that's the problem. My understanding of your concern was it being misused or used in a problematic way that our incident commander or that our department would be uncomfortable with, and that I can certainly be supportive of. I kind of feel like if we make this a checklist that anytime somebody comes in a mutual aid from another agency, that our incident commander has to be aware of all the equipment they carry that might be listed as military equipment and have to check that off, we're adding really an unnecessary complexity. But if we just generally say the use of equipment, we fully encompass that to meet that concern. Plus we handle if somebody's inappropriately perhaps using equipment that's not covered in military equipment, but is typical police gear, perhaps. I think we would want that wider scope because it encompasses everything that's been asked for. It's wider, and it doesn't put us in that position of that we all said we wanted to avoid, requiring the incident commander to keep track of all the different gear from all the different agencies and who's coming in with what. Because that was the focus I didn't want to go to, but I could certainly support the language that the city manager put forward and that you modified to add the use of equipment. I personally would prefer leaving the military equipment part of out and just encompassing all equipment, because I think that's a better protection. But I'll let you make the motion you want, but that would be the direction I'd probably follow. So with that, I see City Manager Obid has his hand up.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, so given what you just said, I don't know that I have a lot more to add because, and I was making notes as well, and I came to tactics or use of equipment that are not in the best interest of the city. And primarily because it's broader, military or not, you don't want someone using equipment in a way that's going to be inconsistent with what we want to see in this community. But also, military equipment implies that we know what that means. And like the beanbag shotgun and the command vehicle, we were shocked to even find out that was considered military equipment. So I don't know that we even know on the ground what's military and what's not by statute. It's just, I think a broader definition would probably be more functional in the field. Is my opinion.
And if the motivating concern tonight was potentially that egregious outside best practices action, then hopefully we'd encompass that. So at any rate, we've had discussion. Mr. Ford, you've heard, I think, from all of us. I'll check and see if Mr. Moore has anything he wants to add. If not, I'll see if you want to make a motion and how you want to state it, and we'll see if it gets support or not.
Thank you, Mayor Lamb, and I will defer to what the language is on the motion.
I'm sorry?
I said I would defer to what the language would be on the motion.
All right, thank you.
And before I make a motion, does the city manager have another comment, or is that another legacy?
I'm sorry, I'm a novice. Let me put that.
I appreciate the city manager's efforts to make me feel better about leaving my hand up quite often. That's the sign of a good employee. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Ford.
Okay. I move that we reintroduce this ordinance replacing 709.6 coordination with other jurisdictions with the following language. It's going to take me a minute. On occasion, the department may be required to assist other law enforcement agencies in formal law enforcement mutual aid requests or support with day-to-day operational collaboration, i.e. pursuits, investigative unit assistance, joint law enforcement operations, etc. In certain mutual aid or operational collaboration circumstances, it may be necessary for sworn department members to utilize military equipment in order to fulfill an assigned mission, i.e. civil unrest, SWAT requests, barricaded suspects in a vehicle, etc. When sworn department members utilize military equipment in instances of mutual aid or law enforcement collaboration, the following shall apply. A, department members are required to adhere to the department's military equipment policy and all policies and procedures outlined within the department's policies and procedures manual, regardless of operational jurisdiction. B, should the police department request mutual aid from another law enforcement agency within the city and military equipment is required during the course of the response, the following shall apply. 1, the department will remain in charge of the overall incident command. 2, the incident commander or designee will brief the supervisor from the assisting agency and inform them of the mission, enforcement posture, and any pertinent information related to the incident. 3, the assisting agency will adhere to their respective policies and procedures, particularly those governing the use of military equipment. 4, if the incident commander or their designee is informed of or witnesses tactics or the use of equipment that is not in the best interest of the city, the incident commander may elect to cancel the request for mutual aid or reassign the assisting agency to a different support mission.
Right, that was a lot to get down. So we have the motion. I'll see if we have a second. I see a hand from Vice Mayor Hardy.
Can I ask a clarifying question before I second?
I think that would probably be just fine.
So it's just something that the chief said last time, and I just want to be clear. Is SWAT considered mutual aid? Because I thought I remember him saying that SWAT provides their own incident commander.
No, so thank you, Vice Mayor. So if I requested SWAT, that would be mutual aid.
It is. Okay. I just wanted that because it was mentioned in the words that Ben read. And then I remember you saying that SWAT was a little bit different. And I wanted to be sure we weren't going to, mix things up here. So thank you for that. So with that, I will second that motion.
All right. Thank you. So then we do have a motion in second. And I will ask if we can have I see City Manager Obid. I think this is not a legacy hand this time. Please go ahead.
Yeah, sorry about that. So one suggested minor edit to that. I think that was a long motion, so I don't know how best to say this, but there was for Councilmember Ford that made the motion, there was a sentence that said when sworn department members utilize military equipment in instances of mutual aid or law enforcement collaboration, the following shall apply, and then it goes through the list. Just one suggestion is rather than it would be to strike the when sworn department members utilize military equipment and just simply have it say in instances of mutual aid or law enforcement collaboration, the following shall apply. it seems to unnecessarily limit it for very specific use of equipment.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to amend my motion if the vice mayor is amenable to that.
I am.
Thanks.
All right. So we have a motion, we have a second, we have an amendment that's been agreed to. I think now we can go to a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Sparks,
Yes.
Councilmember Ford,
Yes.
Councilmember Moore,
Yes, thankfully.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Yes.
Mayor Landman.
And so the motion that, or the agenda item that wouldn't die finally dies. Yes. So, all right, I believe that's unanimous. So that completes that item. So now we do jump to the first item on our regular agenda. And this is consideration of a resolution to approve a deferral of impact fees and granting of funds for affordable housing and public improvements, an associated interfund grant, an affordable housing agreement for the Cotati Station Apartments project. It's item 11A. And I'll ask if we can have our staff report, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'll be doing the staff report tonight. And before I start, I hope Kevin got the language of that motion last time. Better on that, make sure he has the wording correct. And tonight with us for this item, we do have the development team available for questions. So that's Neil Rudolph, Larry Colvin, and the builder, that's the proposed builder, is Dan Morgan. So all three of them are on the line with us tonight if there's questions after the presentation. Okay, so the Santero Apartments project, on June 14th of this year, the City Council re-entitled this 98-unit mixed-use project on Santero Way. And as part of that entitlement, the conditions of approval, condition 9, committed the city to an impact fee deferral agreement, as well as utilizing the Affordable Housing Fund to cover the cost of the impact fees for the low and very low affordable units, which have historically been the most difficult to construct. And the estimate at the time or currently is that the impact fees would be about $275,000. Notably, this project includes a publicly accessible park, widening of Santero Way to improve fire access, and building excess parking to respond to neighborhood parking concerns. And then following the June 14th City Council meeting, staff began negotiations on the Affordable Housing Agreement and the fee deferral agreement. Around the same time, the financing unwound for construction of the project. So staff engaged with the developer sort of in parallel on ways to ensure this project was constructed given the public and neighborhood benefits. Ultimately, the staff and the developer agreed on further impact fee reductions, which I'll describe more in a minute. However, with a tentative package worked out, subject to City Council approval, the developer has engaged with the builder, Dan Morgan, who, as I mentioned, is online, to get this project across the finish line and hopefully get constructed. So the outline of kind of what's before you tonight is an affordable housing agreement, as well as a fee deferral agreement. And and just as way of background, note that housing funds, we can commit housing funds to further affordable housing, but the city can't waive or grant money due to the impact fee funds. So these funds have capital programs to address the community impacts of new development, and would create an obvious issue with other developments if we ever waived some and not others. So that's sort of the background on how things are structured. The affordable housing agreement that's attached to that's in the packet locks in the 19 units for 55 years of affordability, including annual monitoring. There's an annual monitoring fee that's built into that so that we can ensure that they stay affordable and for the next 55 years. And the affordable housing agreement is also the vehicle to fund the impact fees for the low and very low units, which is estimated at approximately $275,000, as I mentioned earlier. The other agreement attached, the fee deferral agreement, allows for deferral of impact fees, currently estimated at $1.5 million is what the total estimate is for all the impact fees, the city impact fees, not including any school impact fees that are charged, but these are just our impact fees. So the fee deferral agreement would defer the payment of the fees from permit issuance. That's normally when the fees are collected, when the building permits issued to later in the project, presumably to occupancy. So that would be at the end of construction. While fees are deferred, they are subject to interest at the LAIF rate. And the reason for that is that it's deferring the normal time of collection for the impact fees. So to ensure they stay whole, the developer is also responsible for the interest that would normally be accrued but on these funds if they had been collected at permit issuance. So the fee deferral agreement includes up to what was a negotiated $325,000 grant from the general funds to the traffic impact fee fund. And it would be structured in a loan agreement that's payable over 5 years. Payable from the general fund to the traffic impact fee over 5 years. And the interest, if the city were to pay this out over up to 5 years, then any outstanding amounts would also conversely be also subject to interest at the LAIF rate. So that's if we don't pay them at the time of occupancy. In recognition of the proposed additional assistance, and I know the staff report calls this out, but I'll also just point this out, that the developer did realign the 19 affordable units to have essentially the same mix of bedrooms as the market rate units. So moved the 1 bedrooms to 2 bedrooms so that at least it's consistent with the market rate mix, and a better mix for the future tenants of the affordable project. And the developer has also agreed to construct the project as 100% electric project to help the city meet its community greenhouse gas reduction goals. So that is a quick overview of what you have before you tonight. And again, this item is requesting that the council approve the attached agreements to the affordable housing agreement and the fee deferral agreement, as well as the associated terms that were outlined. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
It appears the mayor is gone.
Yeah, with military equipment.
Perhaps we wait a minute and see if he can rejoin us. Otherwise, the vice mayor can take this item.
Damien, are you able to communicate with the mayor?
I have not at the moment, no. Vice Mayor, just give me 1 second.
Sure. I hope it was not something we said.
So Vice Mayor, I don't know
All
yet
right.
if he's able to rejoin. I mean, perhaps we could just,
Ask questions and try and move forward.
yeah, no.
Okay. So, Mr. Moore, would you like to ask your question? Then I'll ask mine and hopefully it'll come back.
Certainly. On packet page 124, we're looking at Exhibit B on the General Fund Improvement Grant Matching Term Sheet. There's a section down there on maturity, and it says that payments may be extended if needed for up to 2 additional 5-year periods if authorized by the City Council. What would be the situation where we would need that? And why would we want to extend that out so graciously?
So this would be the loan from the general fund to the traffic impact fee fund. So it's really a loan from us to us. And I don't anticipate that this would be stretched out beyond 5 years, but it's just in there in case, worst case scenario, there's some sort of budget crisis and we can't, we need to not pay this for a couple of years to ourselves. So it's really just providing flexibility if the council wants it. But the council would have to decide that. It wouldn't be automatically beyond 5 years.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification on that.
Yeah, and actually, actually, I would also point out that I know it's highlighted in there yellow, but it's 300 and basically 25,000, not 375. That's the placeholder in there.
Is that all your questions, Councilmember Moore? Oops, you're muted.
For the moment, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And bless you, Councilmember Sparks. I saw you sneeze.
Thank you.
So my question is this fee agreement, is it open-ended? So if they decide that they don't want to do anything for, let's say, like's been happening for decades, that this agreement stays open? That there's no expiration on it?
There is no automatic expiration. No.
So could there be an expiration on this? Since this project, we've had no less than 4 iterations of this, and I'm not convinced that this is happening, although I wish it would. I've been waiting for this to happen for decades.
Yeah, I will point out that just the structure of it all is that the only way that the city would be on the hook for paying these things is if they actually build the project. Because if, the agreement would be out there as an offer, but they couldn't actually collect, to your point, Vice Mayor, it'd be out there as an offer unless the agreement was terminated, but there's no automatic end to the offer. But they wouldn't be able to get the fee reduction unless they actually build the project.
Correct, but this could go on and on and on, and we would be obligated by this agreement indefinitely with nothing in return. Yes, I understand they don't get the money unless it happens. I would like us to consider putting a time box around this, that this agreement is only good for, say, 9 months. I'm just very uncomfortable with leaving these things. And then just like we did the 275 one, the next day, then this thing fell through. And then now we're being asked for something else. I can see this keep extending and more things piled on top of it. So I would like, if we're going to go in this direction, I would like to see a time frame on it of, say, 9 months. If things don't get going in 9 months, that this agreement is not available.
And Vice Mayor, sorry, just to clarify that. So 9 months for the fee deferral and the $325,000 grant, or just the grant?
Yeah. The grant for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
we that, you know, for all intents and purposes ties up money that we could obligate to something else indefinitely. So, I mean, you either get this going or you don't get this going. We're going to have to do something else. It just can't keep sitting out there. So that I don't want to see this out there indefinitely. That is my concern.
Right. Okay. So yes, because the fee deferral, as I'm thinking about it, the fee deferral is tied to it's included in one of the conditions of approval. So it's tied to the entitlement, but the 325 is something new that we're introducing tonight. So that could have a sunset. That piece of it could have a sunset. A sunset,
yes. Councilmember Ford.
Thanks. I was going to propose what Damien just mentioned about the existing fee deferral, which is that we tie the, like, so entitlements expire if they're not acted on in a certain period of time, right? I mean, 2 years? I forget.
Yeah, Noah, is it 2 years?
That's correct. The entitlement, as approved earlier this year, has a 2-year life, and then it has 2 1-year extensions that are available, but are discretionary and from the city council. So it would have to come back for those extensions.
Yeah. So I was going to propose that to accomplish what I think, Vice Mayor, you were proposing, that we just tie this to the entitlement as well. So if the entitlement expires, then this offer goes away too. So that it's, you know, then we don't have to consider if there is an extension ever we need to do with the entitlement. We don't have to separately vote on extending this this agreement. We just tie it to the entitlement, just like the fee deferral is.
Maybe, yeah. The only thing I'm concerned about is, you know, within the last, 6-8 years, we've had those kind of extended and extended and extended and extended. You know, if we get into another recession, we could be in one of those situations where we're all entitlements, and we could be looking at another decade. That's my only concern. You know, either let's get this built, or, we got to do something else. That's my only concern with that. I like the concept, yes. So when was this entitled, Noah?
I knew you were going to ask me that. I believe May, but it's probably in the background of the staff report.
Yeah, June. Well, it was June, right, when it came to council, June 14th?
Yeah. Okay, June 14th with the city council.
Of this year,
Correct.
6/2022. So that would, we still could be looking with the extensions at 5 years.
4 years, but as of right now, it's June 14th, 2024.
That just seems too long for me, but that's just me. Yes, Councilmember Ford.
Well, I was just going to say that big developments take a fair bit of time. And it seems to me that if we tied to the entitlement, we would have the option when an extension of the entitlement comes up to not extend this agreement. And so there's a 2-year sunset on it. We would consider at the same time any extension of the entitlement comes up.
I could be more comfortable with that this is not extendable. Could we do that? Or does it get tied up in that, Damien? Would we have to also extend the agreement?
If it were to come back after 2 years for an extension, I think it's council's discretion on how they want to extend it, if at all.
So what you're suggesting, Councilmember Ford, is that we tie it to that, but we look at, in 2 years, we look at them, make a ruling on them separately and distinctly. One to redo extend the entitlement, and one to extend the agreement. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, I think that's what I would propose to try to accomplish the same thing. So we don't have them ending at different times and things like that.
Okay. Okay. So any other questions at this point? Not seeing any. And we still don't have the mayor back? I'm still not seeing him.
I have been communicating with him. He's trying to get back on.
Okay, all right. So then, Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Harvey. In this whole program, I know that there's been some funding issues and some things like that, but if I can direct the question to the project developers and the builders, do we actually have a builder lined up for this?
Yeah, I'll speak to that, Councilmember Moore. On the line is Daniel Morgan. He is in contract with us to purchase the property with these entitlements and these sets of plans, and he can speak to his experience in building in the North Bay. He's an extremely experienced builder in the North Bay, and so I'll defer to Daniel to pick it up from there.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Dan Morgan. I am, I've built 400 plus homes in Santa Rosa, currently have 2 projects there, worked in Cotati before, and happy to answer any questions you might have.
I do have a question. Do you foresee any potential problems down the road outside of this with the financial incentives in place?
No, my biggest concerns with, I've spent a lot of time looking at this project. I'm excited about it. I love the rail. My biggest concerns are with what's going on in the economy, and none of us can control that. The project itself in today's market stands on its own. I had a conversation with Damon today about terms, and we're not in a great position in the economic cycle, so that's the stuff that none of us can control. As far as the project goes, I'm committed.
Thank you.
And Councilmember Moore, I just would want to thank both Noah Hausch and Damian Obid in working with us on all these documents. It is a big effort from June 14th through to today to get all these documents done and through legal review, both at the city and on our side. And staff has been very, very transparent and very, very open to our discussions, and I hope they think we've been the same to their points. This has been, as Councilmember Harvey touched on, a project that has gone on for a long time through a couple different administrations at the city of Cotati, and this went very, very well, and I just wanted to thank staff.
So I'm not seeing any other hands at this moment. Am I missing anything from anyone? I too can't see everybody on here. Please speak up. If not, I will go ahead and open this up for public comment.
Thank you, my Vice Mayor. If you'd like to make
It looks like our mayor is sitting in the participants. He just popped in. If maybe Kevin, you want to move him over while we.
All right, just give it a moment. We've promoted him.
Yeah.
When are we going back to in person?
Well, if I may speak, I was able to cut tomatoes while I was waiting to have this meeting. It was quite nice.
Very nice.
And is that a metaphor?
No, actually, I was chopping basil and tomatoes, and we're gonna have a lovely dinner tonight.
That sounds delicious. My favorite.
Mine too. It's almost over.
I don't see him anywhere. Do you, Kevin?
I do not. He's not listed
He's
in.
like disappeared. All right. So why don't we do public comment and maybe he'll pop in somewhere.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. If you'd like to make a public comment tonight, please use your raise hand icon, or if you're dialing in, dial *9. Vice Mayor, that will end public comment.
All right. We still have no mayor, but that's okay.
The mayor's in the panelist list now.
Oh, sweet. Mayor, would you like to take your meeting back?
Hang on just a second. Yes.
All
I'm
righty.
moving back to the office. We'll see if the connection stays.
That's fine. I'll give you a recap. We had a little bit of a discussion and we did public comment and we were just bringing it back to the council at this moment. So that's kind of where we're at.
Go ahead.
I see his square.
That's
Did we lose him again? Oh.
For a moment, it appeared his camera was on with no picture.
Now he's gone again.
Now he's gone again.
I think you're on,
All right.
Vice Mayor.
All right. So is there any comments or questions from anyone? Any statements on this item? Yes, Laura?
Thank you. I just had a few moments to think over Mr. Morgan's comments earlier. Thank you for sharing them with us. I just wondered, there have been some problems with getting the financing to work out for this project. And I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit more to that, Mr. Morgan, if you feel that this current, I know what you said was just sort of, we can't tell, we don't know what the economy is going to do, we don't know what the economic situation will look like, but is there just any more you can tell us about your feelings about this new agreement and whether it's workable to get the project actually built? What are your thoughts on that?
As we sit here today, in today's economy, with today's underwriting standards and the concessions by the city and the projected costs of the project works. What I don't mean to scare anyone, but I went through 2008, and what happened in January, in June, 6 months later, was a different world. And that's today, this project works in this world. So I hope that helps answer your question.
I think so. Thank you very much.
So to follow on to that, how quickly will you know whether finances are a problem or not?
Susan, I was excited to get started on this before the rainy season. I am not, any slowdowns are going to be due to what happens in the world, not what happens in my world or Cotati's world. I would like, my goal, and I had a conversation with Damon today, my goal would be to start after April 15th and get a building permit shortly thereafter. I would like to submit for the building permit before the end of the year. I am prepared, and I'm prepared to go now. The only thing that could stop me is anything that could happen with what's going on in our economy.
Well, I've not done a commercial project, so I've not done commercial financing, but I have done, home mortgages. And sometimes that can be very timely. And when you talk about underwriting and all of the things that they want in the commercial market, how long do you think that usually will take, and how long will that take you to get a blessing from the whoever it is that you're using to finance?
The markets, the credit markets are all pretty much the same in terms of it's pretty level playing field now, as opposed to what it was in the 80s. But I remember, you probably don't, but I remember in the 80s, interest rates were 18%, and nothing worked. So that's the kind of scenario that I want to just put out there. I don't think we're going to go there, but that's the trajectory that we're on. And I don't want to, if it can be done, I'll do it. But if I'm prepared to do this deal, I don't need any other partners or investors in today's underwriting environment. 6 months from now, I don't know where we're going to be, but so I'm committed to the project, but I don't like to rely on things that I don't have control of to make commitments.
Okay. And are you okay with the concept of tying this agreement to the entitlements?
I am.
Okay.
And I talked about that today with Noah, and as long as we have enough runway for the contingencies that are anticipated, I'm in agreement with that. Yes.
Okay. Yes. I mean, I think you may or may not sense my frustration with this project, but I have seen this project come before us in no less than 4 times. And each time, it's this excitement. And then the next day or the next week, oh, well, that fell apart. And so it is extremely frustrating to keep, trying to do things differently and add things to it and commit funds to it and, everything else we do to try and make it happen, to see it time after time after time after time fail and never get off the ground. And that is my frustration, is I would like to see it. And we've had some good projects that have been put forth. So that is why I'm extremely frustrated, and I really, nothing, against you and your building, but I just have my doubts, and it doesn't make me feel really any better when I hear, oh, well, there's lots of things not within my control, because it just feels again like, oh, great. So next week we're going to hear that, whatever the reason is. So.
No, Susan, I understand your concern. As a matter of fact, I raised that question. I said to Larry, why hasn't this gone? Why hasn't this gotten built? And, I understand. I mean, our world is cyclical, and when things don't line up, they don't line up. I'm hopeful that they're going to line up this time.
Me too. So, Councilmember Ford?
Vice Mayor Harvey?
Oh, did we get you back?
Yes,
Yay.
I'm going to go without video, just
okay.
Not to stress this connection, and I don't think it'll be a great loss. So I understand we've had some questions. I've heard from you and Councilmember Sparks, and I believe it's to Councilmember Ford now.
It is.
Thank you very much, Vice Mayor.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thanks, Mayor Lamnon, and thank you for your service, Vice Mayor, there for a while. We've already had public comment on this, right? So we're in, okay. And there aren't a lot of hands up. I'm basically ready to make a motion, but I'd like some input from the city attorney about where to put that expiration into I think it goes into the actual agreement document, the development impact fee deferral and grant agreement. I assume as a new section 24 or something like that that just says expiration, expires June 13th, 2024, and 2024 unless extended by mutual agreement or something like that.
And could I ask Mr. Ford, since you're speaking, could you very briefly bring me up to speed on what's being proposed? I understand tying the agreement to the entitlement.
Right, that's right. But Vice Mayor Harvey proposed that we put a sunset, some kind of time limit on the grant and fee deferral agreement, and then I propose we tie that to the entitlement, which expires June 13th, 2024. So I'm just proposing that somehow we add an expiration.
And I understand the developer is comfortable with this, so great. I'm up to speed. Thank you. Let's go right to Mr. Bacher and see what advice he could give us on that.
Damien, I am trying to, is the grant only mentioned in that recital at the beginning of the agreement? Is that the only location that the grant is mentioned in the agreement?
No.
Give me 1 second.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, the grant is mentioned in section 2.5. So one approach that we could take is just to add some text to section 2.5 that says that section 2.5 indicates that the city will make the grant, and we could make the grant subject to a requirement that building permit is pulled. The grant is offered when the building permit is pulled, and so the grant would only be offered so long as that building permit is pulled within, is it 9 months of the date of the agreement?
2 years.
2 years.
2 years. So I think that's the way to do it, is to add that text to 2.5. Damien, does that make sense to you?
I'm not sure. Well, I think, but I think the motion can just be that just directing me and the city attorney to work on adding the expiration provision. I think we understand the terms. We can work.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that as well.
Yeah.
Okay. If that works, then Mayor, if it's okay, I'll go ahead with the motion.
It sounds like it's time for that. Thank you.
Okay. I move we approve a resolution approving a deferral of fees and grant of funds for affordable housing and public improvements, including an associated interfund grant for Cotati Station Apartments project.
All right, we have a motion. I'll ask if we have a second, please.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion by Councilmember Ford, seconded by Councilmember Moore. Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Can I ask a clarifying question, please? Did that
and
motion,
a clarifying question. Go ahead, Councilmember.
Do we need to state the 2-year adjustment in the motion itself?
Thank you. I should have said that. With the addition of an expiration 2 years from the date of the project entitlement.
And I'll okay that second amendment.
All right, so we have motion second, a clarification to that, or okay to that clarification. Without further ado, then I think we can go to a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Sparks?
Yes.
Councilmember Ford?
Yes.
Councilmember Moore?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harvey?
Yes.
Mayor Landman?
And that's a yes. All right.
And
All
we're
right,
crossing
Mr.
our
Morgan,
fingers.
you have, we're hoping you're the change of pace here. We wish you the best, and we're looking forward to good news because we know it can happen. All right, with that, we are moving on from this to our last item, item 11B on our regular agenda tonight. and that is proposed changes to the Sonoma County Tourism Business Improvement Assessment. We did have a presentation from these people a while back, and I'll ask if we can have our staff presentation, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, Council. So this was, as you had noted, back on August 9th of this year, Sonoma County Tourism presented to the City Council. And actually tonight we do have Kelly and Claudia with us as well.
So apologies for the interruption, City Manager a bit. K.O. Hornbostel, who's one of our board members, is also, I think, in the participants list, but he's not on the panelist right now.
Promote him to panelist.
Thank you.
So a little bit of history. So in 2004, Cotati, along with Petaluma, Sebastopol, Roanoke Park, Windsor, and Santa Rosa, and of course the county itself, formed a tourism business improvement assessment to promote tourism in Sonoma County. Back in August, Sonoma County Tourism presented to this council a requested 1% increase in the assessment, as well as the removal of the $350,000 threshold for collection of the assessment. At that meeting, as everyone will recall, the City Council asked questions about budget and marketing practices, which Sonoma County Tourism responded to with a letter that is attached to the staff report that also has links to a variety of resources from that letter that hopefully answers the questions the council had. So subsequently after the August 9th meeting, Sonoma County Tourism revised their request of all the cities in the assessment area to remove the 1% increase in the assessment and simply ask for removal of the $350,000 threshold for assessment. This threshold will raise an estimated $2.2 to $2.5 million in additional funds for Sonoma County Tourism to market Sonoma County, and will also put vacation rentals on the same playing field, subject to the same assessments as traditional hotels. Given Sonoma County Tourism's marketing benefits both equally. Note that in Cotati, we don't currently allow vacation rentals. In the future, if we did, they would be subject to this assessment if the threshold is removed. Since this is collected by the cities, it's a local collection. It would require staff to collect and remit these funds to the county, as the other cities that do have hotels currently do. At that time, if we were to, regardless whether it's vacation rentals or a hotel, if one of those come online in Cotati, we would enter into an administrative fee reimbursement agreement to defray the cost of collection with the county. At this time, all other cities in the BIA area have approved the change except for Santa Rosa, which is planning to hear this on October 11th. And Sonoma County Tourism, as I understand it, plans to bring this before the county supervisors in October, with adoption planned towards the end of the year. And with that, I will just pause there, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Well, that's a perfect segue. Let's ask the council if anybody has any questions. I'll be looking for hands, and I'm not seeing anything just yet. I do have one for you, Mr. Obid, or anybody who cares to answer. I'm curious. So for this to be able to go forward, is it required that all original members of this agreement, basically the city and all the cities that were originally part of this in the county, must agree? In other words, if the city doesn't agree to this, does this kill the whole proposal?
Someone from Sonoma County Tourism may have a more precise answer, but my understanding was that the County Board of Supervisors had asked Sonoma County Tourism to work with stakeholders, including the cities, and try to get everyone on the same page on board with it before they bring it back to the county.
So this is just looking for unanimity, but it's not absolutely required by statute or document. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, that's my understanding. I think for it to apply in Cotati, we would have to consent to it, but I'm not aware that it has to be unanimous.
Okay.
Technically, from an assessment standpoint.
Understood. So let's see, I'm not seeing any hands or from my colleagues as yet. So why don't we go to public comment with this and see if the public has anything they'd like to offer?
Thank you, Mayor Landman. Speaking to our attendees tonight, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use your raise hand icon. Mayor Landman, that will end public comment.
Excellent. Well, I'll bring it back to the council. Any final comment, questions, direction from the council? I see a hand from Councilmember Sparks. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for including the letter responding to some of our concerns about diversity, equity, and inclusion. I appreciated that additional information. So thank you.
All right. Well, if nobody has anything, I will mention, feeling somewhat like the Grinch in this, I noticed one of my major concerns was flight noise, because clearly the more we increase out-of-state tourism to visit us for short overnight or several night trips, we increase that. And I didn't see really that spoke to at all in the material I received back. I'm in a difficult place with this simply because I support the idea of some degree of supporting tourism in the community. Since we don't even have one hotel, it's not unreasonable to provide services that people are already looking for that live here. Going greatly behind it, I'm not sure if that's at this point a good thing for Sonoma County or not. Having said that, I'll leave it up to the will of the council, but I would just say that personally, if we were viewing this for the first time, I don't think I would agree to sign on to it personally. But seeing as we've done this and they have trimmed back the request considerably, I see no problem in supporting it to continue as it currently is. So with that cheery note, I'll see if nobody has anything else. If somebody would like to make a motion.
Mayor, I'd be happy to make a motion that we adopt a resolution of consent to removing the minimum revenue threshold for tourism assessment in the existing business improvement assessment, BIA.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Harvey. Do we have a second for that, please?
I'll second.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Sparks. So we have a first from Vice Mayor Harvey and a second from Councilmember Sparks. If there's no further questions, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Sparks?
Yes.
Councilmember Ford?
Yes.
Councilmember Moore?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harvey?
Yes.
Mayor Landman?
And only mildly surly, yes. All right, so that carries. Thank you very much. So now we've completed our regular agenda. That jumps us back up to our public hearing. We do have one public hearing tonight, which was our master fee schedule update. So if we could jump to our staff report and that, we can get right into it.
Thank you, Mayor. So everyone knows and loves, we have a master list of administrative fees for a variety of things. And just to summarize the staff report, we did last year we went through a very extensive process of fee study and updating our fees. And it was a complete overhaul of our administrative fees. And as you would probably expect after something that extensive from top to bottom, there's going to be some things that just are kind of, they just are confusing or don't read well or just need some clarifications. So that's primarily what's before you tonight is a variety of clarifications and adjustments. And this is summarized in the staff report, but I'll just go through kind of the main points of, aside from just small like type clarifications, the things that have any sort of substance. In-house building plan check is one of the things this was changed from a flat fee to a percentage of the building permit costs, as this is more in line with the regional norm. And based on the value of the building permit and staff time needed, this is likely, just a heads up, less than 100% cost recovery, but more reasonable for lower value permits. This is primarily the ones that you see for small value work in single family dwellings. So just a caveat on that one. Water heater, HVAC, and panel upgrades. This update is proposed to bring it closer to cost recovery, align it with regional norms for single purpose permits. Third, MEP permits. These are mechanical, electrical, plumbing permits. It's a new category of fee that was added to allow simple percentage to calculate the fee when the work is included as part of other work under a building permit while retaining the fee schedule for MEP only work. So that's just we just found as we started using it that just the way the new permit tables were put together, that sometimes you have MEP only permits and sometimes you have MEPs as part of larger building permits. And so we found that it was important to be able to have a distinction there where we could issue them separately. Impact fees, the only change here is one impact fee for the hotel categories removed because this is under commercial uses. Went back and looked at the traffic impact fee study, and this is how it was analyzed. So that's the more appropriate fee for it. Water meters, given the continually changing cost of materials, this change sets the meter cost to actual cost rather than a fixed cost in the fee schedule. Cannabis permit fees, they were just changed to be consistent with the same fees listed elsewhere on the fee schedule. So basically just cleanup. Concealed weapon permits, the current fee schedule only included a renewal fee for concealed weapon permits. This revision adds a fee for issuance of a new permit. Cancellation fees for facility rentals. The cancellation fee is updated from a flat fee to a fee that allows no cancellation. That allows no cancellation fee with 7 days notice, but adds fees when a cancellation is short notice, making it difficult for the city to rent to another customer. That was incredibly confusing. I'm sorry if that made no sense at all. But basically, the issue that we're trying to deal with there is that we get some, we get some very, very last minute cancellations. So last minute that we can't do anything to re-rent the facilities. So it's just changing it from the flat fee to basically part of whatever the rental fee is as a disincentive to last minute cancellation. And then events and parks, updated this to be consistent with the level of staff effort needed for permitting medium and large park events, as well as updating the security deposit for the larger events. And then lastly, fee for non-contract events in city parks. This is something new, kind of came out of COVID, where we have someone that wants to do a instructor that wants to do something in a city park, but if they're not affiliated with the city, they just want to basically rent the park for an hour or two to do a yoga class or something. And it just provides a clear fee category for that type of use. And just as a reminder, these fee schedules, they're generally intended to be at 100% cost recovery of the estimated reasonable cost of providing the service. In some cases, they're less than full recovery, but those are, we try to call those out. So that's a conscious decision of the council, because some fees just don't make sense to charge 100% cost recovery, like replacing roofs or water heaters or things like that, because it would just act as a disincentive for people getting permits. And that's not what we want to do. We want to make sure everyone gets permits and gets these things properly installed and inspected for just basic building safety. With that, I'll stop, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right. Well, let's see if anybody has any questions, and the vice mayor does. Please go ahead. Next, we'll go to you, Councilmember Sparks. Vice Mayor Harvey, I think you're muted.
Thank you, Mayor. My goodness. Not really a question. There is a typo, and it's repeated on 2 different pages. On page 42 of the packet and 47, the paragraph down at the bottom, it says for services requested of the city staff, which have not been listed. It says city manager of the city manager's designee. I think it's supposed to be or the city manager's designee. And that same error is copied again on 47.
Right. Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Councilmember Sparks.
Thank you. Damien, I did have a question about the water heater permit, which you then brought up yourself right at the end. I've recently replaced my water heater and spoke to a couple different plumbers, and my real world experience was them telling me, oh, nobody bothers getting a permit. You don't need to get a permit, really. And I said, well, no, I'm going to go get a permit. So I'm wondering if resetting the fee a little higher is going to, I think we're already at a point where we're disincentivizing people to get the permit. I'm wondering, how much does it cost to send that inspector out? He was only in my house for about 5 minutes. I'd personally be in favor of keeping that water permit fee a little lower to, as you said, incentivize people to actually get it done and not skip it. And then my second question was about page 65, the park packet, page 65. Turn my pages here. The park fees. I'm wondering for events, for free events, it's quite a jump for medium and large events, going from $60 to $150, and the largest one, a really big jump from $85 to $500. So I was curious, would this have any impact on the farmers market, or what sorts of fees are they paying? And I'm just want to know what sorts of events we have running that might take a big financial hit from having to pay these larger fees. Thank you.
So I'll start with the park one first. The farmers market, or I actually can't really speak intelligently as to which ones come in under free events. I do know that the recreation department updated these fees based on what they saw as reasonable, both in terms of timing and in terms of what they see regionally in other parks. And I can tell you, my general experience with them is that they try to be at or below what's kind of normal to keep it reasonable. So I can't really speak to the difference, the jump, the change per se, but I feel pretty comfortable that they're regionally right where they probably should be for these kind of things, because recreation's always pretty careful about that in my experience. On the water heater one, so Noah, maybe you can speak to that one.
Yeah, you are correct. So we're currently subsidizing that fee, and the proposal is to continue to subsidize it, but less, and raise it to essentially parity with the surrounding communities, and targeting Sebastopol as our closest kind of comparable. And while I'm sure you spoke with several folks who were discouraging the water heater permits, we do issue almost one every day, or multiple water heater replacements per week. And while some of them are a very simple inspection, sometimes we have to go back because they didn't get the water drain line correctly installed, or as we get to and transition to more heat pump water heaters, the inspections will be a little bit more complicated. So we're trying to project for that. But staff is fine if the council direction is to continue to subsidize those at the continued rate.
All right. Anything further, Councilmember Sparks?
No, thank you.
I see a hand. Councilmember Moore, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Lamb. There was two things. One question, and I don't know if it would fall under these fees, but don't we have a annual continuous issue with the backflow permits that people don't want to pay, and we have to do assessments and everything like that? Would this be an appropriate time to look at potentially upping those fees to discourage the additional administrative work required on those?
Councilmember Moore, so we can, for backflow devices, we do have costs in there for administration, but this fee study is supposed to cover the reasonable cost of the activity on the staff's part. So it's not like a penalty. It's not basically we can't assess penalties for this. This is administrative fees, which are supposed to have a reasonable nexus to the actual cost of doing it.
Okay, so any penalties on that particular situation wouldn't be applicable in these particular fee schedules?
No, these are just the city administrative time, testing time, those sort of things, those sort of fees for backflows.
Okay.
It's a good thought though.
Well, yeah, just because, they talk about cost recovery basis on there and actual dollars that are used in that, it doesn't necessarily bring in the administrative cost or the additional time and labor for having to repeat customers do the same thing over and over and over again year after year. So you guys can bring that up next year.
Yeah, when they do these nexus studies, they look at the aggregate costs. So you're always going to have your super user customers and your super simple customers, and overall, that's kind of where it averages out.
Okay. And then my other question is more of a thorn in my side, and that's the penalty for tree removal without a permit. There's hardly a weekend, or it seems, that somebody's not cutting down a tree on a weekend with no permit. How do we incentivize them or disincentivize them to not do that? I don't know that 2 times the replacement value is sufficient. I mean, if word got out that we were really having a significant fee for cutting a tree down without a permit, I'm sure the neighbors would be telling each other. Is there any way we can address that?
Well, I mean, that would be a code enforcement thing, right? I mean, if you think the neighbor is cutting down a tree that's covered under the tree, you would a tree permit. It could, it could be report to code enforcement, but I don't know about actually putting a fine on there. It would really depend on, if it's a significant issue in code enforcement, that can get pretty expensive, without actually putting an explicit fine on it. And I don't know overall.
Are we allowed to put a specific fine on there?
Damian, I could comment on this if you want, and maybe Noah can as well.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you.
It's not uncommon for heritage tree ordinances to have a provision that imposes a fine if somebody cuts down a tree that is protected by the ordinance, and often it's based on the appraised value of the tree, and often it will be 2 times or 3 times the appraised value of the tree. So that would be something that probably wouldn't be appropriate for the master fee schedule, but it could be an amendment to be looked at with the city's tree ordinance at some point in the future. That's the council's direction.
And why wouldn't it be appropriate for the fee schedule? If you've got 2 times the standard removal fee and 2 times the replacement value, can we just make that 3?
Councilmember Moore, that number comes directly out of the tree ordinance.
Okay, so that'll be brought up, or can be brought up down the road.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's a little bit. It's there for convenience, so it's transparent and easily findable by everybody, but it really isn't adopted as part of the fee schedule. I mean, it's in the fee schedule, but it's not set by the fee schedule.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I believe we have Mr. Ford next, followed by Vice Mayor Harvey.
Nope, mine was taken care of.
In that case, we're going to go right to the Vice Mayor.
I'm concerned, as Councilmember Moore was, about this whole backflow thing. If I understood you correctly, Damian, basically you say it's the charge for services, but the services don't include if we have to go the extra mile to have multiple council meetings, a public hearing, then pay to have it put on the tax rolls, and all of those fees are not incorporated for those handful of individuals that don't pay and they're consistent. It feels like they should be charged a fee for those services akin to what it costs for us to do that if we have to go through those processes, because it's really not fair for those that take care of business and get it done, and then there's those that continually cost us money to be able to go through all those processes.
Yeah, Angela, when fees or when back go to public hearing, what type of additional assessments do they get typically?
So at that point in time, good evening, Council, Mayor. At that point in time, they have the actual cost of the test, the tester's time, their services, the administrative fee, if there's any repairs or damage that we have to have corrected, those costs are in there, as well as if then at that point we send them out invoices, and if they do not pay, they are then also assessed a late charge, which is that $15 late charge, which is in the fee schedule, and that's our standard for all utilities, any of those late fees. That's the same amount across our code, and then that is what is included on the assessment. If they continue to not pay by the time we get to that point, then that is the accumulation of all the costs that get rolled up into that gets brought to council.
So do we get to charge them for the fact that we have to have a public hearing and then we have to pay the county to put it on their tax rolls? And, I get that they get charged for the individual items and we send them a bill, but past that, it seems like all that's free for them. And so they just use that, they're using our money, if you will, to bridge that, and they're not paying for what actually it costs us, because there is cost associated with it having put on an agenda and being taken care of and processed as an item. And it's a public hearing, so we have to go through the whole public hearing process. I don't think we're recouping our money for that.
Yeah, I think it's, I know we've gone down this road before on backflows, and I thought the answer at the time when we looked into it was that there was a limit on, by ordinance, what kind of additional fees we could put on them. But maybe, I don't know, John Bacher, if you happen to know if it's just a matter of an ordinance change to assess penalties or fees for people that end up on the assessment roll.
Well, I mean, you could charge those are all costs that are imposed on the city by virtue of those folks violating the code and the city having to take steps. And it's not uncommon. Some of the bigger cities charge for the costs associated with the lien process. And I think for also the hearing process, if the person were to win their appeal, you can't charge them for that. So the city could do that, but there'd have to be some supporting. We'd have to support the amount. So we couldn't do it tonight, but you could give staff direction to update the fees imposed for backflow, folks that violate the backflow prevention requirements, and we could update them later. Angela, is that consistent with what you're thinking as well?
I would agree. Yes, that's what we would have to do, is update that in the future for those.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's fair enough. It just seems to every year we go through this and it's just the behavior needs to change. And I guess if we have to change our ordinances so the behavior changes, we've gotten so much better on the water stuff. It just seems that we should we must be doing something not quite right to get these individuals to continually be in this position. So we should address that. Thank you.
Yeah, Vice Mayor, there's the backflows, and then there's the one sewer customer.
Right.
Every year, right? And
same thing, because it costs us money and it costs us time. You know, I mean, as Angela said, they were billed, they were giving, I would imagine that it's like a 3 notice billing before it gets that far too. You know, it all costs money to do that. So we should put something in place. And that's all to say.
Right. Yeah, right now our ordinance just says all costs incurred in testing, inspection, service, repair, and replacement of a defective device will be billed to the owner in addition to an administrative fee. So it sounds like the ordinance itself would need some work, and we can work with the city attorney on that.
Thank you. I would appreciate that.
All right, I did have one question, but since we just had a good discussion that, I will chime in and say that I agree with the general consensus that seemed to come forward between the vice mayor and the city attorney and the city manager. I would like to see us come back with something to increase costs, have some realistic deterrent to our repeat customers, as it were. Our backflow stop laws and our one sewer customer that evidently regularly forces us to go through the process. I think that would be valuable for the city. We've been doing this for years. And it's time to get serious about that. One easy question for staff I wanted to ask, going back to the increase in the cost of park usage. When was the last time we assessed change that? How long has it been? It might have been in the packet and I missed it, but if somebody could tell me, that might be helpful and clarify something.
Mayor, I'm sorry, I could barely hear what you said. You got me.
Let's try this again, and I'll try speaking up a little more.
I feel like you might be covering your microphone. That's what it sounds like.
Let's try it holding the thing differently. I have no desk here, so let's see. Getting right down to it, I supported what the vice mayor asked for. I think that's a great idea going forward. I'd love to see some sort of way of dealing with our repeat customers. That was the first thing. Second, a simple question for staff regarding the park usage fees, which have jumped somewhat. When was the last time we assessed that or made changes? How long has it been?
Well, the fee schedule that we have before us tonight was a year ago. It was adopted a year ago. Sitting here, I can't say that the fees changed much from what they were before that.
Because I asked that simply, when's the last time we really went out and ground truthed what the current regional cost is, what our real costs are, versus just passing on the costs from last year and only changing some other things. I don't think we've really revisited that in a while. Did I understand correctly, though, that staff felt that those new costs definitely were regionally correct? Is that based on empirical comparisons?
I think my understanding is both the time involved for the permitting and also regionally consistent.
Yes. All right. Well, good. That's all I wanted to ask. Thank you. So if we have no further questions, this is a public hearing, and it is time to open the public hearing and see if we have any comments.
Thank you, Mayor Landman. Speaking to our attendees tonight, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use your raise hand icon. Neil Hancock, please go ahead.
Yes, good evening, Council. I was just looking at the electric vehicle charging station, which is on page 12, and it's priced as a flat fee at $4.95. The HVAC and the water heater fees are at $180. So, I mean, I'm just comparing HVAC at $180 with the electric vehicle charging stations, similar thing, up to 50 amps at $4.95. And I'm just wondering, I thought in a previous meeting when this came up before that the charging station, at least for the residential side, would be pegged at the same as, or was talked about, the same as the water heater and the HVAC. So at $495, it's almost half the price of an electrician, I think, from what I understand. But So anyway, I'd just like to bring up that fee. Thank you very much.
Mayor Landman, that will end public comment.
All right, in that case, that concludes the public hearing. We'll bring it back to the council. I'm open to more discussion and direction on what we'd like to do if anybody's interested in moving adoption of this resolution. Councilmember Sparks, I see your hand.
Thank you. I was just wondering if the city manager could address the public comment that we just had. Was there some previous discussion, do you recall, of keeping that fee lower, and was there a decision to change that? I just wanted to get some clarification on that.
Well, the fee in the schedule here is unchanged from the current schedule for electric vehicles. I don't, I mean, I could be just not remembering it, but I don't recall a conversation about pegging it to some other fee. Obviously, it's the council's prerogative if they want to subsidize, a fee. So that's always an option.
I'm sorry, were you done? Did that answer that, Councilmember Spark?
Oh, well, it did. I would just finish by saying, yeah, I would like us to consider, following on from my question before public comment, I'd like us to consider keeping the water heater fee low and potentially lowering the electrical vehicle charging station fee to subsidize them. And I'd like to know how other people in the council feel about that. And I'd also like to know more about what the potential impacts of raising the park fee so drastically might have on our farmers market, because I don't know what they're paying now. So if we increase that fee by potentially up to $400 per, and I don't know if they're paying that every week, it could have a drastic impact. And I don't know if there are other events in the park that could be impacted really heavily. So I just wanted to know more about that before I felt comfortable changing that fee so much from what it is now.
Vice Mayor Harvey.
I was wondering, since it was pointed out that on the park fees, we kind of looked around to see what our neighbors were doing. If it wouldn't be prudent for us to do a similar thing with the charging, to see if $4.95 it is an amount that's consistent with others, or are we, way out, in left field on that and charging more, just so that we're, more or less consistent with what others are charging for similar services. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. All right, Councilmember Ford.
Yeah, I had similar concerns. I appreciate Mr. Hancock for raising it. That stood out to me as well. And I do remember an earlier conversation about trying to keep EV charging inspection fees low. So that stood out to me because that's almost exactly what most chargers cost these days. So, and given especially the juxtaposition that Mr. Hancock pointed out, that it's basically the same electrical work as a HVAC circuit, almost identical, amperage and voltage and everything. So I'm not sure the justification for a triple cost for an EV charger compared to an HVAC inspection. And so I would support Councilmember Sparks' goal there of keeping that lower.
All right. Let's see. Anybody else have anything they want to add? Councilmember Moore at this time?
No, the only other thing I would add to that is, would you want to also look at the commercial or the residential, or both combined on the EV charging fees?
Well, my focus would be the residential ones. Commercial ones are subject to much more use and abuse, and I think the fees don't scare me as much for those purposes.
All right, and I see a hand from the city manager who seems he'd like to jump in. Mr. Abid.
All right, I'm putting my hand down so I don't make that mistake again. Yeah, so on the EV chargers, so they are, Noah reminded me that they are, they're already subsidized, they're capped. So the EV chargers are, and the same with the solar, they're regulated at the state level in terms of maximum fees you can charge. And they're already, these fees that are in here are already regulated, already capped, subsidized is what I mean to say, sorry. And that's plan, check, and inspection. The reason why you can't compare it directly to water heater or HVAC is because those are more heavily subsidized. and also there's minimal plan check for residential HVAC. So it's a different sort of level of effort. And I just say that as way of background. I mean, obviously the council can do what they want in terms of fee subsidies for residential EV charging, but it is already subsidized and capped by state law. And then I don't have a good answer yet on the farmers market, but I'm trying to find out how they're feed. So I'll let you know if I can get that answer before we finish this conversation.
All right. Well, with that, let's see. The only comments come to mind, I would agree. I would have some comfort with subsidizing to some degree the charging stations, particularly in the residential areas. I think that's a good suggestion. And that makes a lot of sense to me. I'm a little less open, at least off the top, of looking at further subsidizing water heaters, understanding, according to staff, that even with this increase, we're still essentially subsidizing that. I mean, a water heater, and I say this as somebody who has about literally a 35-year-old water heater. It is still working. Every plumber that's been under my house is amazed at this and says, I certainly got my money's worth. So I know I will be paying this fee pretty soon as I say this, but I'm not sure if I'm sold on that. As far as the park usage, I suspect we're fine if we match regionally. But if the council wanted to take some time on that one issue and either have the whole thing come back or have just that come back to us separately, I don't know what would be easiest for staff, just to take a look at. I know the feedback we will always get from anybody to an increase will be, oh gosh, no, it's terrible and I can't handle it. But I would like to get the feedback, at least, as Councilmember Sparks said, and I'd like to have a little further, perhaps, no, these are the costs at other places, here's the hours in it, these are reasonable times. Because if there's a good argument that we're regionally correct and we're not overcharging, we're just trying to cover the cost of providing this service as an entire park for somebody's use, maybe it'll be okay. So at any rate, yes to subsidizing chargers, at least for me, not so much for water heaters. And I would like to see, if it's possible, something come back in the park usage. So I have a better idea, because that's kind of a question. I think it'll be okay personally as staff's recommended it, but I'd like to hear just to be sure. I think that's a good idea. So that's my thoughts. So let me ask staff, first of all, would there be any problem in doing anything like a carve out on one issue, for example, parks? If the council wanted to do that, how would you recommend the least problematic way for staff to approach
that? So parks, actually, this is a question for the city attorney, I think. So
okay.
John, these fees, we're doing this through a public hearing. And if we certainly can report back on them, but if we make changes, then we're going to have to probably have another public hearing and readopt.
That's correct. Yes. If you reduce them, you wouldn't, but if.
So we could move forward, have the information come back. If we choose to reduce it, we wouldn't need to have a public hearing. Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
Correct.
Mr.
That's correct. The rules apply to increases in fees generally, and not to reductions.
All right. Well, we'll see. Maybe the council is not even interested. We'll see. I see a hand from Councilmember Moore, though. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Regarding the park fees and free events in the city park, would not the farmers market event be a small event, non-resident permit fee of $85? On page 30 of the fee schedule or page 65 of the packet?
I would think that it's permitted in under either less than 50 or certainly less than 249. I'm not sure which. I'm trying to find out how they're permitted exactly.
Yeah, having been involved in the chamber previously, it wasn't a significant fee. And so I think it would fall under the $85 category. At least if I was the farmer's market, I would argue that.
I imagine so.
Yeah, I mean, they've been a partner with us, so it's. I mean, I think the fees are minimal, to be honest. But I'm trying to find out exactly for you guys.
Well, just a quick comment is that all of the sizes were $85 or $60 prior to this change, so we don't really know which category they're considered under. If they were paying a low amount in the past, they might. I just don't know. You're probably right. I just would like to know for sure if it's going to be a major impact on them.
Well, with that then, so Council, we have 3 items before us that we're concerned about: potentially further subsidization of water heaters, question about the park, and I'm hearing some agreement to subsidization for chargers, I think. So in terms of the park, I understand we could go forward what we have proposed tonight, have the information come back that was requested, and if we choose to reduce it, if we see a need to reduce it, we can do that without another meeting. Would that be, I'm just looking around for heads nodding, would that be an acceptable outcome? Generally? Okay. So that takes care of that. We could do that. So I guess I'll be looking for a motion and some direction what to do with the question of further subsidization for chargers or water heaters. And I'll leave that to the council and see where they go. And I see a hand from Councilmember Sparks. You know where you want to go.
Well, I would be willing to make a motion that we update the master schedule of fees, but with the change that we reduce the electric vehicle charging fee to $180 to match the fee level for the HVAC and the water heater, and that we direct staff to investigate the park fees and their potential impacts on users of our parks.
All right. I see another hand up. I'll look for another motion, a second, or any further discussion as well. Councilmember Moore?
I believe Mr. House indicated that there was a greater level of complexity in the EV charging station versus the water heater or HVAC issue. So I would not support that reduction in that at this time.
Well, let's see. That's a perfect time because I see a hand from Mr. House. So let's see. We're moving in a direction here. We'll see what feedback we get if we perhaps move too far. Mr. House?
Thank you, Mayor Lemon. Yeah, I just want to make sure everyone's fully aware. So comparing those two permits is on the surface, I can understand how it seems like they are comparable, but the process is not. So water heaters, HVAC upgrades, those are over-the-counter permits. There's no plan check required for those. So you just come in, you fill out the application, we give it to you, and then we confirm everything is adequate in the field. That is not the case for any electric vehicle charging that is actually being hardwired. There are a significant amount of plan check requirements, which, just a reminder, I'm happy to go the direction of the council, but I want it to be a fully informed decision. All of our building department services are outsourced, and so we pay for our building department. So they are just city contract employees. They're not staff where we have opportunities to kind of save kind of economies of scale. It's a hard cost for that work on an hourly basis, regardless of the revenue we bring in. And generally, we are already losing money on those electric vehicle charging permits, similar to solar permits. The recovery is capped by the state. So just be aware of that, because although it has a $495 fee, a portion of those, there's a lot of different smaller fees within that. So the city does not get all of that money even to contribute towards the actual hard cost.
Well, Mr. House, if I could ask you, while I have you on the line here, from a staff perspective, given that council appears to be indicating an interest in doing some level of subsidization for residential EV charging,
what would the staff proposal be for an appropriate level of subsidization?
Well, yeah, so I wasn't prepared to get into this so I haven't done the analysis to get an average cost per charger, hardwired charger. There is absolutely a distinction between the wall mount that you buy and you plug into your dryer plug. There's no permit needed for that because all the infrastructure is already there. So this is just to make that distinction. So I don't know what the true cost is up front, so that I couldn't provide you with a good subsidy number. If
let me ask Mr. Bacher a question then. With that, I don't want to put you in a position of trying to guide us on numbers when you haven't had a chance to actually look at them. But Mr. Bacher, you indicated we could pass this as it is tonight and revisit it at our next meeting, perhaps, if we wanted to, and not have to have another public hearing as long as we were lowering the cost, not raising it.
Yes.
Is that
correct? Yes.
So that, I'll just make that suggestion to the council. I too, like you, would like to hear staff's perspectives and what they feel is a reasonable level of subsidization. And then from the rest of you, I suspect we'll pick something lower than what's on there tonight, in which case we can lower it easily. Would that be an acceptable outcome to the council? And I see a bunch of hands up. So I'm just going to go, let's see, and I'm not sure who's first. I'm going to go with the Vice Mayor, Councilmember Ford, and Councilmember Sparks. That's a new hand, right? And I'll get you then. So go ahead, Vice Mayor. And you are muted.
Golly gee, I would like to see the real numbers, since these are numbers that we actually pay out the door, because this is a contract services. I'm a little uncomfortable with us, picking a number when, for all we know, when we see the real numbers, it could be $1,000. And for us to be subsidizing $800 just off the top of our heads does not seem financially prudent. So I personally would like to know what our hard costs are before we consider wanting to subsidize for these. I agree in concept that we want to keep the price low, but it has to be reasonable with known numbers, not just guesses. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Ford.
Just, I agree with this direction to give staff a chance to look at this issue because we brought it up when they weren't expecting it. So I am in support of that. I would like that to include it. As I read the fee schedule currently, if I installed a new AC when my home didn't have AC, that's going to involve at least as extensive wiring, new wiring, exactly on par with installing an EV station. But as I read the fee schedule, that's still just a $180 charge. Same as replacing a current unit, which is much less, much less to inspect and no plan check and things like that. So I'd be curious when this comes back to hear about that difference between new versus replacement, and if that's reflected in the fee schedule somewhere that I don't see. Thanks.
And let me ask you turn your microphone off, and I should have asked the Vice Mayor, apologies. Both of you are interested in seeing these numbers come back and not putting staff in a position of dealing with it tonight. I understand that. Would you be more comfortable with delaying the whole item, or would you like to just pass it and then revisit it, and knowing that we can lower these numbers if we choose to without having another public hearing? What's your pleasure?
My preference would be to approve the amended fee schedule with an agreement to put those that EV item, was there one other, on a future agenda, but just that.
Okay. Does that sound good to you, Vice Mayor? Okay. I'm going to go to Councilmember Sparks because you were next, and then I'll check in with you too, Councilmember Moore.
Thank you. I'm okay with this general direction. I just wonder if somebody comes in to get an EV charger permit next week, is someone from staff going to warn them that they should hold off because we're going to lower the fee? I would hate to just push this through for our own convenience and then have somebody get caught paying the larger fee just because they timed it exactly wrong.
Councilmember Sparks, I'm happy to telegraph that future
Okay.
council agenda item.
I have a
Okay,
much
thank
higher
you.
expectation of staff, so I'm not worried about that, but I think we could make that suggestion part of our motion if you're concerned.
No, I trust you. Thank you.
And I do want to touch on, because Councilmember Ford is absolutely correct, but that is partially why we have with the cost of a brand new HVAC system versus replacement. But staff has to evaluate and apply the appropriate fee. And so we would look at that likely as a standalone mechanical, electrical, plumbing, or plumbing permit, and then do it based on the value of that work, not give them an automatic decreased fee because, they don't get to pick which category they're in. The staff applies the correct one.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and Mayor, sorry, I don't mean to just insert myself here, but just so everyone knows, if the council does approve this tonight, it doesn't go into effect for 60 days. So there's a 60-day window anyway.
Well, there we go.
Great.
Councilmember Moore, any thoughts on this? Are you comfortable with where this is going?
I would like to make a motion if you're okay with that.
Okay, I think you've answered my question and move the meeting forward. Please go ahead.
I would move that we adopt a resolution updating the master fee schedule and charges for city services and repealing previously adopted or conflicting fees and charges for such services.
I would second that motion.
And should we include in the motion the direction to staff to bring back the discussion of the appropriate costs for chargers as soon as reasonably possible and parks? I'm seeing nods in general. Will that work for the mover?
I don't know. Do you need a motion on that?
Can we include that just as, I'll ask Mr. Bacher, can we just give that as direction to staff or should that be included in our motion?
You could just give it as direction of staff, and I think staff understood that in any event.
Good. So we've got that covered. I just want to make sure it didn't get lost. So we have a motion in a second. If we could have a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Sparks,
Yes.
Councilmember Ford,
Yes.
Councilmember Moore,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Yes.
Mayor Landman.
And that's a yes. So that carries unanimously. Thank you, everybody, for working through that. So this completes then our public hearings and jumps us to item 12, the city manager's report. So I'll hand it to Mr. Obid.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So we have some fun things coming up. We have Cotati with Coffee with a Cop at Oliver's Market on October 5th. So that's right around the corner, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. Come on down if you want to partake. So that's coming up. The drug take back event that I mentioned last time, October 29th. And this is here at 216 School. So it's the community center from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. It's ongoing. It's an ongoing partnership our police department has with the DEA to take prescription drugs out of the landfills and out of the wastewater and get them properly disposed of. If anybody wants to win an iPad, you can enroll in auto draft or auto pay for our water and sewer billing, and sometime between September 1st and December 31st, and you will be enrolled to win an iPad. So you can call our administrative services department, or on the city website, it's there as well. Look for the details. A little drought update. So water usage totals from Sonoma Water and our own use is in, and we're holding at 29% less through August this year compared to the same time period in 2020. So I imagine some of that is due to a change in patterns related to COVID. More people were home then than they are now, but still it's a good reduction from 2020 to 2022. We have a variety of services, of course, all available on our website to reduce your water use. The street paving project, the city, as you guys know, because you authorized it, is currently paving 5.4 miles of roads in the city. This includes Old Redwood Highway, Commerce Park, McGinnis, Jorgensen, Ross, Lipton, Lancaster, Tequisto, East Sierra, Chadwick, Cervantes, Maple, Alder, Locust, Blodgett, and Trevino. So basically, if you're out there driving around anywhere that looks like all the striping's been ground off, that's a street. So We're going to be doing the slurry seal on. It was going to be this week, but it got delayed due to rain. So not rain this week, but rain the prior week that delayed some other work. Anyway, the slurry seal is going to be October 3rd, 4th, and 5th. So next week. And we're putting out nixles and temporary message signs to let people know, as well as letting residents know, and trying to schedule work so that the disruption is minimal, but there will be short-term road or lane closures during the work. I understand that October 5th is the day that Commerce and Old Railroad Highway will be slurry sealed. So, expect a traffic snarl because that just seems to be what happens, but we'll do our best to try to keep it as painless as possible. McGinnis pathway. So if you've been out there lately, you've seen that they've dug up the old pathway on McGinnis Circle that goes from McGinnis Circle to Marsh, as well as McGinnis Circle to the bridge that goes to Lincoln. And those are going to be finished soon with the DG kind of TerraPave material that we've been putting around town. Okay. So the biggest news is, I know I've been talking about this forever and you think that maybe it's never going to happen, but fear not, it's finally here. The housing element, the draft housing element is out. So if anyone's interested in reading that, getting their jump on it, that's on the city website. It's on the headlines. You'll see it there and you can click right to it. But we will be coming to council on the October 11th meeting to just sort of run through the housing element and have a discussion about it and get any questions from the council. But this is the public review, and then after that we have to bring this through Planning Commission and Council. And I'm sorry, I'm doing things out of order. So 30-day public review period, 10-day respond to comments, 90-day review by each CD, and then it comes to Planning Commission and Council for hearings and adoption. So it's going to still be a bit, but it's coming. So look for that. And then finally, just to wrap it up on some events, last Friday we had our first Cotati car show and our last movie in the park for the year, and it was a huge success. We had about 30 cars, including classic cars, exotic, lowriders, and even the police Tesla was out there. So we had lots of children and families check them all out. And the movie, of course, was Pixar Cars in the park. And we had about 350 guests for this event. And we're already talking about having it again next year and hopefully growing it. This Friday, September 30th, we're hosting our next Kids Night Out event at the community center. So this is our really what I would call our Parents Night Out. It's the opportunity to drop your kids ages 5 to 12 off, and they can have fun with pizza, crafts, games, and the movie, while their adults can go on a date night or just relax for a few hours, and it's from 5 to 9 p.m. And then also just a reminder, this last week is the last week of this year's farmers market, Wednesday afternoon, 4:30 to 7:30 p.m. in La Plaza Park. And the very last thing is that we are going to do Cotati Candyland Halloween Trick or Treat event again this year throughout downtown Cotati. So we're partnering with our local businesses to hand out candy on Halloween between 2 and 5 p.m. downtown. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I see a question from the Vice Mayor. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Damien, is there any way that when they do Old Red and Commerce, that we could put some signage on Redwood and 116 to give people other options to get out to the freeway? That whole area last week when they were taking off all the stuff, people just couldn't even move at all because they had it down to one lane, and it was literally impossible to get out to the freeway. So if we could kind of get people to turn off on Redwood to get out to the freeway that way, or at least give them the option to do that, it might help with some of that, because it was really bad.
So traffic, Vice Mayor, you're saying traffic that's eastbound coming from.
Right. If we could let them know so that they could have the option to turn on Redwood to get out to Highway 101 that way, rather than, I mean, I sat through 5 lights before I could even advance enough to get under the freeway.
Okay.
Just
yeah, I can pass it on to Public Works.
Yeah, it might help with some of it. It's not going to help with all of it, but it might help. Thank you.
The good news is it's one day, so yeah.
That helps. Councilmember Sparks.
Yeah, I just wanted to second Vice Mayor Harvey's comments that if people know far enough away from the disaster that they can avoid it, then it limits how many people. I was talking to City Manager a bit about some of the impact of the Roanoke Park repairs on East Cotati. Similar thing, I just got completely stuck in it forever, and I would have just taken a completely alternate route if there were postings far enough away from it to let you know that there's going to be a big problem so you can avoid it.
All right, let me just check and see any further questions for the city manager's report. If not, we're then going to segue right to the next item, which is city council member reports. And I'll ask if anybody has anything they would like to share or report out tonight. It's very quiet out there in council member land right now. And well, then, all right. Thank you, council member Ford. Go ahead.
I'll give a real brief one. I staffed a table at the Fiesta de Independencia at Luther Burbank Center as a member of the Russian River Watershed Association board. And it was a fantastic event, despite it being on a rainy day. It was a week ago Sunday when it was still raining. This was Russian River Watershed Association's first time having a table there, but I'm pretty convinced we'll continue. It's a great event.
Good to hear. Good to hear the ROWA is still getting out there in the public. When they get out there, the public usually enjoys seeing them. So good. I'm not seeing anybody else right now. I have just essentially one thing to mention, and I will mention that I was joined by Vice Mayor Harvey as well as Councilmember Sparks on the 15th in the park for the inauguration of our Police Patrol EV, which I'm very grateful for Chief Executive Officer Jeff Cyphers from Sonoma Clean Power and Executive Director Suzanne Smith from SETA RCPA for making the time to come down and speak. We were joined by them, a group of public and many representatives of the press, and it was a well-received and good event. Got a lot of coverage in the press from it, which is good for our city. We were kind of leading on something in the county, which is good. And I will note that I was then invited, because of that, the next Monday to have a brief interview with Steve Jackson on the drive in KSRO. Again, well received, and Mr. Jackson kind of helped put that challenge out there, saying, gosh, he thought it was a great idea that Santa Rosa should look at doing this next. And he mentioned that the mayor of Santa Rosa was going to be on the show next. So he kind of did all my work for me, and I didn't have to do much, and that was a very good thing. And lastly, I'll just share related to this, I have asked, working through the chair and staff at RCPA, if we could agendize a discussion of this issue. Similarly to the gas station ban that Mr. Ford brought to our council. You may remember how that went to RCPA and then went out as a recommendation for all cities to do. It's about a year ago. A year later, we're sitting here with 7 of the 9 cities on board, and I believe one more are likely to come very quickly. So that's worked well. And part of my challenge to asking other cities to join us to reduce GHG emissions, to save money out of their budgets and save tax dollars, is to do that. So I've asked if they could just bring this. I understand it will be at our next meeting. I'm not sure the form, if it will be a simple resolution encouraging cities to agendize a discussion of electrifying their fleets and powering them with local 100% renewable power, or if it will be in the terms of staff coming up with some sort of best practices recommendation. But the end goal will be that. I'm hoping it'll be the former rather than the latter, just to move adoption quickly, because I think it's something that could take off in the county. And that once it takes off in this county, there's no reason we can't help it take off in other counties. And you get a few counties going, people are going to notice, and it could take off across the state. and just basically help with our adoption and fuel change to move to electrification. So that's my report for this week, and seeing nothing further, we move next to item 14, which is public comment on non-action items. We do have an attendee. I'll ask if we have any public comment on non-action items.
Thank you, Mayor Landman. Speaking to our attendees tonight, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use your raise hand icon. Mayor Landman, that will end public comment.
All right. I'll then jump to ask the city manager for item 15 if we have any information received after the agenda was posted.
No, Mayor, just some comment letters that were attached to the packet and sent out.
Which I did see sent out. Thank you. All right. With that, that brings us to item 16. With no objection, we are adjourned at 8:53 tonight. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Vice Mayor Harvey, for covering in for my weak internet connection. I'm glad you were there.
Mm-hmm.
Good night, everybody.
And you're most welcome. Glad you were able to join us again.
Wouldn't miss it.
Take
care.
Bye.
Yeah. Good night.
Good night.